All right, hello and welcome everyone to a builds refresh for Garuda. So Garuda did receive some changes in the Exalted weapons update, though I don't think she exactly qualifies to be called an Exalted Warframe with the way that her talons work. But there is a new build for her, and we are going to talk about it. It's not too much different than what we've run for her in the past, and there are two builds to talk about because one of them just is basically the build that we've run in the past. But before we get into all that, let's talk about the shards. First and foremost, we're on 2 casting speed shards, and these are excellent, especially if you're going to be playing a more melee-focused Garuda. I would really advise both of these, but at least one of these. But they're not needed at all. You're going to spend more time casting without them, but that's really not a big deal. You're going to be invincible pretty much anytime you're casting as Garuda, and she has unlimited energy, so if you have to cast again, that's really not going to be a big deal either. Otherwise, the additional slots here, probably best is all strength, or like if you want some more parkour speed, or just up to your flavor. Personally, I don't think that there's a whole lot of things that really need to be in these slots, but strength is always good. So that is just some considerations for the full loadout for her. Now, before we talk about the build on her, I do want to talk about the parameters around her prime talons. So for those that don't know, you get access to Garuda's prime talons as your regular melee weapon whenever you don't have any other melee weapon equipped. This means that, unfortunately, in ETA and EDA, you really don't get the option to use these things. You technically do, but you won't get credit for the parameters in ETA and EDA if you choose to not bring a melee weapon. Do I think that that sucks, and it should be that if you have an empty slot, it also meets the requirement for any weapon it's trying to tell you to bring? Yeah, that would help Garuda, and also I think it would be more convenient and more fun for everyone involved. Whenever it just gives you a bunch of weapons that you don't have in like your secondary slot or whatever, you can just equip nothing instead of having to go figure out what one you need to build the easiest in order to meet those parameters if you would like to. But side effect, Garuda doesn't get to really use her melee weapon in those places. Otherwise, in places like Circuit, which is the other place where this would come up, if you just don't pick up a melee weapon, you do actually get her prime talons, which is all fine and good. Anyway, let's jump into the build and talk about it, because this is a bit different than what we've run in the past. This build is tilted more towards melee, and that is the reason why Blending Talons is here. So this turns our 4 into a circular AoE instead of being like the kind of expanding conal AoE that it normally is. And because we're going to be in the middle of enemies meleeing, we would like all of the enemies around us to be affected by this, and enemies farther away don't really matter as much, so the shorter range on this is okay, even though we do have to build a lot of range into this in order to get it to that nice above 20-meter radius so that it is nice and useful. But this is what I would suggest if you're going to be more so on the melee. If you're going to be using guns more, I would suggest not running this at all and probably running Augur Reach instead for additional range on your 1, because we're going to talk about how that comes up, but you could also run more strength in this slot too if you prefer that. Speaking of strength, we're on Blind Rage and we're on Umbral Intensify to get us up to that 183, counteracting a bit of the overextended. The reason we're on Blind Rage and Umbral Intensify is because we have Bloodletting, and Bloodletting turns our health into energy. That's really effective, and this energy gain at 25% of our energy for half of our health is affected by Nourish, so it's going to usually be half of our energy returned anytime we press Bloodletting. And we're on Prime Flow, so we have 912 energy, so that's quite a lot of energy income. In addition to that, our 2 is replacing our Blood Altar, which normally would be the way Garuda heals, though it's never been particularly effective. So we need healing because we need health to turn into energy. Luckily, there is kind of a tailor-made arcane for this in Molt Reconstruct, which is to heal yourself and allies within affinity range for 6 health for every energy point spent on the initial casting cost of abilities. This is a tremendous amount of healing. Our 4 costs like 155, Nourish costs 77, and even Dread Mirror costs like 38 on this because we are at that negative efficiency. So we heal a ton anytime we cast abilities. We spend so much energy and can spend so much energy that even at the lower ranks, if you have like a unranked even, or even like a rank 1 or 2, which are very easy to acquire, that's more than enough healing for this build to sustain itself and just have infinite energy, which is of course very good. Now, in terms of how this build is going to survive, we're on Prime Sure-Footed, because if you're in melee range, you're very likely to get knocked down, and if that happens, you're very likely to die, so we don't want that to happen. If you're going to be in melee range all the time, I would say this is fairly required, and I would maybe suggest a gun version of this build if you do not have a way to resist knockdowns. Otherwise, we're on Brief Respite. This is going to convert the energy that we spend into shields, which means anytime we cast an ability that costs energy, we're functionally invulnerable. In addition, the functional invulnerability extends to when we roll, at least part of the time. We're going to have Rolling Guard, which will remove all harmful statuses from us give us 3 seconds of invulnerability. This is really great in just kind of edge cases where your shield gating is just like not up to what you need to be doing. So like if you're fighting violence and like, oh, I can't cast my abilities, just roll and then kill violence with your claws or whatever else you happen to have on you. This really just covers everything that your normal shield gating casting abilities invulnerability doesn't cover, and I find that it's very convenient in that way. Otherwise, we're also on Aegis. This is just kind of additional insurance on the not dying part of this build. Probably totally unnecessary, but when it comes up, it's really nice not to have to worry about turning your shields back on for the full 12 seconds. This could be other things. If you really want to go more into melee, it could be things like Arcane Fury or even Arcane Strike to get more attack speed or just damage. And there's, of course, like a whole host of fairly generic things you could also be running. If you wanted to run something like Blessing, for example, to hedge more against Toxin procs, that's also, I think, very reasonable. Though, of course, you're going to spend a percentage of your health, but you heal a ton off Reconstruct, so it doesn't super matter. It's just a small hedge against Toxin, because Toxin is going to be your #1 enemy. You do not have much health, and if you get touched by Toxin, you will probably just die. But there's not really anything we can do about that unless you're willing to run the Dread Ward, but that's kind of a whole nother thing for you to be doing. Now, if you're not running Blending Talons, what do you run? Either Augur, Reach, or Strength. I would say the range is probably the more preferable one, because I think that DPSing with Dread Mirror is actually a pretty reasonable way to go, and getting the additional like 3 meters of range on the Dread Meter Ball is actually pretty good. We'll be showing off how that deals damage in a moment here. But this is kind of a more, I would say, high effort to build. You need to like be managing your shield. You need to be like making sure your abilities are online. You're in melee range. It's more risky. The classic, just going for Gloom and just doing gun good stuff. Enemies are slowed. They're at the end of a hallway. Like, they're very easy to deal with. And you have like things like Eruption and stuff knocking them down and making them very just, not a threat to you. This is still great. If you want a more aggressive playstyle, this is more so the way to go. It is also worth noting that your 1, the ball, and your 4 are both considered weapons, and for that purpose, Nourish actually will increase the damage of both your 4 and your 1, so it's a very good increase to the damage output that you're getting there, and your 4 and 1 can both proc Viral whenever you do have the Nourish buff on. Because of that, because it is a weapon, there's also other things you can consider, like Arachne. Anything that generically affects damage, just generic, will affect your 4 and your 1 as well, so you can kind of soft mod those in that way. But that's just a few other things that you can do. Now, in terms of talking about our melee weapon, of course, we're on Naramon. We don't need Zeneric. We have infinite energy. That's just kind of what Garuda does. So Naramon to beef up our melee playstyle is just fine. And you might have already guessed it. Guess what? These talents, they can use an influence build. Shock and surprise, I know. Influence does kind of one of the things that Garuda doesn't do, which is do damage through walls. So it's kind of objectively the way to go here. But really, this weapon is not too particularly special. It does good damage. Its stats are like pretty competitive. It's got like very good crit, very good status. It's relatively speedy. Claws are like you have a decent stance here with Vermilion Storm. Just pretty good overall. Its heavy attacks are nice. You can do Discipline's Merit. It's not too heavy on the Forma investment. Just kind of pretty good stuff overall. Like, it's a fine weapon. Like, it's not going to beat the Nami solo or anything like that, but it is quite nice. Now, if you don't want to do an influence build, there is the duplicate heavy build. This is just, hey, I'm going to do heavy attacks to enemies, and they're going to die. If you put your 4 debuff on enemies, and especially if you're also running, the Nourish buff on top of that, enemies won't like this. This does plenty of damage to take down like heavy targets and stuff, especially once you have Reflex and Steel's melee kill requirements beefed up. Of course, it's much, much faster because of doing Killing Blow plus the Amalgam Organ Shatter, and that's also all fine and good. This is just worse, but if, for whatever reason, Influence gets nerfed, then you'll just probably go right on this. Although, realistically, if Influence gets nerfed, you're probably not going to be using your melee weapon. So, that's kind of what's up. So, let's show off what this does in kind of like the normal scenario. Let's show like what you're usually going to be able to do whenever you just don't have weapons. If all your weapons suck, what are you going to be doing? Well, as I said before, Augur Reach is kind of your friend in that scenario. And this is going to be the very normal playstyle for her, where you are going to turn on Nourish, reset this so that Nautilus doesn't move all these enemies around. You're going to turn on Nourish, use your 4, make it so all the enemies just will always take slash procs from everything you do, grab an orb from an enemy, and then throw it. That's going to put slash procs on all the enemies and deal massive, massive damage. And that's if you just use your 1 on an enemy one time. And that was also a weak enemy. You can see I have 500,000 damage here from killing that heavy gunner. But yeah, your 4 as a debuff on enemies, plus Nourish, plus your 1 being thrown, does a really considerable amount of damage. And with this much range, like a 25 meter plus radius, which is quite good for clearing out groups, especially in open areas. Now, of course, the downside here is that our 1 is a soft line of sight check, which means that through sufficient walls, because it will go through some objects, it just kind of won't work. So most of the time you will be better off if you have a thing that can ignore that, such as, of course, Influence. But if you've got no weapons to fall back on, that is definitely what I would be doing. Otherwise, though, we are on Blending Talons, and Blending Talons is, of course, going to be very, very good because it's going to be used with our Talons. This is just, enemies go in, you turn Nourish on, you want to, like, use your 4, it just instantly gets cast, and then we can just melee it up. Of course, you do need to build up combo, but you can see that it builds up pretty fast, and, of course, besides that, like, it rips and tears pretty well. Like, not bad at all. Just some good damage output, especially once we have our passive kicked up there for the additional 100% damage, which affects pretty much everything that we do. Now, the additional thing to add on to this is, of course, the thing that I have been not doing, which is Nautilus with a Verglass. Now, this has a special benefit on specifically Garuda, and you can use this on both forms of the build, whether you're on the like more melee-focused one, or if you're on the Verglass one. Both actually really benefit, or on the non-melee version of this build, rather, not the Verglass one. Both really benefit from Nautilus, because the grouping is always going to be good. But in addition to that, Nautilus with the Verglass does very considerable damage, and making it so that his beam also procs Slash means that those Slash procs are his. So through the Contagious Bond that is on this build, those will also spread. Meaning that he can really go crazy and cascade out some damage with Contagious Bond, giving you a pretty nice little bump to your kill rate, which we're going to be able to show off pretty easily. He's also buffed by Nourish, which is a whole nother consideration. But yeah, throw this out there. Just do this. To give him like a million Slash procs, you can see that it's pretty effective at taking out a whole lot of enemies whenever that contagious stuff just spreads around and kills everyone. So that's a nice little benefit, as well as that you kind of just, as a side effect of what you're already doing, really buff the kind of Nautilus game plan at the same time. Now, enemy AI being on is not really going to change what's going to be going on here. And the reason for that is, like, we're going to get our orb. You have the shield that comes from your 1, which is also a consideration. But being able to, like, just turn on your shields over and over is more than fine. Of course, Nautilus is going to do this here. And anytime we're in danger, we can just press 4. We can cast very quickly with all of, like, the shards that we have and such. And anytime our shield breaks, anytime we see that, then we're just invincible. We turn our shields back on, and it's not a problem. We don't have to think about it. We just can't die. So between, like, the directional shield and if somebody shoots you in the back, you just hit 4 and then everybody takes a bunch of Slash procs, there's not a huge amount of risk in here if you are being careful. You definitely can still die. Mostly it will be because you weren't paying attention for a couple seconds, which I'm, of course, very accustomed to whenever I'm reading chat. Yeah, that's kind of like the over-under here. Once you have, like, a decent ball built up, of course, you can just, like, use that by just holding your 1 and throwing it out. You can see, like, very large amounts of damage there. Just clear out all these enemies at once. It is also worth noting that, like, having the shield up, when enemies shoot the shield, it does build the ball up, which is, like, a small consideration for doing more damage with it. But its damage output is pretty good, as you can see. Yeah, anyway, let's jump into Tav and just do some crazy Bloodlord shit. This should be a relatively chill test. I mean, it is going to be higher effort than a lot of the builds that I show, but not really a big deal. This build kind of runs very similarly to, like, a Korra, just with, like, a weirder way of dealing damage, I guess I would say. Because you do have, like, kind of a system. We do have enough starting energy just to hit, like, 2 and then 3 twice, and then just be max energy here. We will be on low health, but the moment we cast our 4, you can see that, like, boom, hey, look, I'm at full health now. Great. Besides that, we're just going to build up our melee weapon and get Influence rocking. The Influence, of course, does it very, very well. And that's, like, one of the things here is that with Blending Talons, not needing to charge up our 4, anytime, like, we get the shield break sound / effect, we can just, like, go crazy with it and just go for it. And of course, our claws are quite good. Worth noting that, like, in an ETA or an EDA situation or anything like that, you can just do this with any melee weapon. Like, her claws are not, really very different than just whatever like decent influence melee you happen to pick up for your ETA or EDA. So unless your options are truly horrifically bad, you can still pretty much accomplish this. Like her 4 has like more competitive stats. Not her 4. Her special melee has more competitive stats than a lot of things, but even still, with her 4 debuff on enemies, like slash procs are not as good as they were, but they're still pretty good when every single hit inflicts them. Like there's there's a real consideration for that still. If you can make every single hit inflicted, it is quite good. It's worth noting there's also like I know people wanted to see what she's doing with her 4. You can still also do the breach surge thing with her. Which for those of you that don't know what the breach surge thing is, breach surge plus her 4 is like a loop that kills enemies just whenever you do it to them, because if they're affected by both the breach surge effect and her 4's effect, they'll have infinitely scaling slash procs kill themselves. It's pretty slow though. Like it's not a very good rate for like current day Warframe, and it's also like line of sight based and all of that stuff. So it does like functionally infinite damage, but it doesn't work on a whole lot of things that you would really want it to work on, like liches and stuff like that. So it's not as worth it as like just like going into like this melee realm and like shield gating it up, I would personally say. You can see we can also use our like 1 for like good movement there if we're going down the area there. You can see anytime we get like even moderately a smidge of reduced energy, we can just hit 3 and have all of it back instantaneously. If energy is ever a concern on Garuda, something has gone horrifically wrong. As an additional little bonus, you also are in affinity range healing your entire team. So if you really want to stretch the definition, this is a support build for Garuda as well. Which is, I mean, you are putting a debuff on all the enemies around you and also healing your team. So you're doing all of those things for quite greedy reasons, I would say. Though it does affect a lot of the ways that allies will do damage. So some definite benefits there for your squad if they happen to be around you while you're doing this. Throwing our 1 in there, just, the directional shield is, like, not amazing. I really, of course, always have wished that this would just be, like, DR or, like, just something that was, like, a full 360 protection because, of course, she is, like, theoretically can be built melee tilted as we have now. And if it was some kind of, like, CC prevention, maybe you really wouldn't need, like, sure-footed if you're going to get this close into melee range and things like that, but it is what it is. And we're doing just fine, just hanging out in the tunnels here, doing influence things to the enemies. You can see, you'll be able to see like kind of like the full damage of her claws whenever we get the acolyte to show up. Because especially with like the Tennokai hits, it can hit very hard. Although you did just see like a nice 3.2 million there, which is quite spicy. Yeah, throw our 2 on, re-upping our 4 on these enemies. Obviously, you don't really... Oh, hey, there's violence, speaking of which. So for violence, you can actually grab this. As I mentioned, like, oh, I accidentally heavy attacked too soon. Doesn't matter. As I mentioned, we do have rolling guard for the purposes of things like violence. Like whenever it's like, oh, for whatever reason, shield gating's not going to work, simply roll, and now nothing beats that. So, we love all reliable. Sometimes it just comes back to, hey, have you used rolling guard today? Turns out it's a good mod. It's actually kind of an interesting situation because there's actually, kind of an underused survivability, but not one that I would ever want to become standard, which is just like rolling guard plus fast deflection effects, because those 3 seconds are enough time for like a lot of Warframes to get all of their shields back. And then like if your shield can hold out for 7 seconds, which is not particularly difficult, your rolling guard just comes back up again. It actually has a really high uptime for the amount of just totally invincible you're going to be. And also it clears all statuses, so kind of a funny thing that a lot of people don't use. It's actually one of the setups that's like for new players, it's so unnecessary, but it's one of the better things they have access to, is equipping fast deflection. Just because of like the way shields are now. Like shields have gotten like slowly buffed over time, where like they had like, I think it was 25% damage reduction to start, now they have 50. And like obviously we have the shield gating and stuff that got added, and like all of these different factors just like come together to really make it pretty compelling. Like shield regen is pretty good at this point. I'd say it's actually much better than like the pure health stuff that maybe dominated a long time ago. But pure health falls off as you get into, like, you know, we're in a meta now where it's like, oh, well, you want to do ETA and EDA. And it's like, well, those enemies are level 500. It's like 2,000 health. It's fine if you have a bunch of DR on top of it. But a lot of those enemies just do that much damage. So shield gating is really one of the things that is going to be able to prevent, like, the sometimes like 15,000 plus damage you would take. Which is kind of a weird one. I think that we're probably at some point due for some kind of a health gate. Like, if they want to make, and like, you know, us be able to health tank in like a comparable way to like the ways that we do overguard and shield gating, I think having some kind of a, like, once we're on health, we have to like be hits, you know, a certain number of times. Like, no invincibility, but like hits have like capped damage on health or something. There's probably some type of parameter that I think will have to be different, but like a thing at some point probably. Because as it stands now, like, you know, shields much outpace health in terms of like what survivability it's ever going to be able to offer. Because it turns out the survivability of like shield gating is infinity. And it's just pretty good compared to any other number. So, not bad. Got Torment here. And try and hit him with my my claws here. Get a big heavy attack going. All missed. It turned into water. There you go. Nice big hit there. Nautilus died, but that's not my problem. He'll be back soon. Oh, E just triggered, so we're invincible right now anyway. Guess we're just chilling out here. Oh, I haven't been keeping track of the... Yeah, we're at 981 kills. Just doing... I mean, like... What do you expect? We're doing, like, good influence things effectively, right? So... Like, we're doing influence plus every hit we do inflicts slash procs. So, like... Yeah, it's pretty good. It's certainly better than, like, just DPSing with her, like, 4 plus her 1. Her 4 plus her 1 does infinitely scale, though. So that is a definite consideration, is that, like, whenever you grab this orb from enemies, I do have, like, 1,000,000 damage sitting up there, and I also am not paying attention to my shields because I'm talking. It's my Yap Tax hitting me very good there. That's okay. My operator can bring me right back up. We do have our orb. Yeah, in terms of this, like, you can just throw this, and even on, like, an Eximus like that, they just get evaporated, and also everyone in this hallway got evaporated. But that is one of the things about this, is, like, literally, like, what was just shown, like, you know, you do have to pay more attention if you are just, like, you know, this is not a build to be telling jokes to your friends in a Discord call about, because, like, it'll result in your death a good amount of the time, and if that is what you're trying to prevent at all costs, it's one of the reasons people don't really like shield gating that much. Like, having to resort to it whenever it is not, like, inherently just constantly done by the Warframe, like on Korra, is it's an inconvenience, I would say. I would say most people would not gravitate towards it given any other more passive option. And, you know, we only have, like, about a minute here, but that's kind of a thing that I should probably talk about in, like, a main channel YouTube video, is that, like, my builds generally, they're not for, like, you know, giving to someone to, like, go to level cap or, like, do some, like, you know, kind of meaningless run like that. Like, there's exceptions to, like, with that, like my Revenant build, which is, if you're going to go to level cap, what I would pretty much always just take, as it's, like, you know, like, the most efficient thing in most cases. But, usually I, like, make comfy builds. Like, the last Garuda build and the other one that I showed, the Gloom one, is way more chill than this. You're way safer, you're invincible for more of the time, and it's just, like, a more, like, just put these mods in and turn your abilities on and it just works.jpg. And I think that that's, like, really comfortable for people. So, like, you know, just a consideration for, like, what my builds are meant for, as opposed to, like, being the most super try-hard shit ever to exist. Which I hope people appreciate, because it's meant for, like, you know, a lot of people use my builds as, like, a baseline to, like, then go in whatever direction they think is more fun. And that's great. But, like, you know, if you just want to install it and have it just work at any content you're likely to ever do, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, 10 minutes for a 1300. Good influence weapon plus debuffing. What do you expect? All right? I mean, like, her claws are like an enhanced version of like basically every other claw in the game. Even there's an argument even there for Valkyr's claws too. Valkyr would love it if she could use just the normal claw stances, I think. And yeah, totally like good stuff. It's an interesting build. It's a fun one to like bring Garuda into like more of a melee style. Do I think it's the most efficient thing and it's the thing I'm going to bring to everything? No, probably not. But you know, the build can easily be swapped around to like a lot of different like variations. If you're going to go guns, as I mentioned, you just take out the 4 augment and replace it with more range. And it's some pretty easy swap in and outs depending on what you want to do with Garuda, but you are pretty much always going to be on that, you know, spamming invincibility, whether it's rolling guard or re-upping your shield gate, or like just staying in your 4 with its non-augmented cast and stuff like that in order to stay alive. Or you can go more chill and go something like Gloom. But yeah, that's going to do it for the Garuda refresh. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you tomorrow. Hey everybody, it's time to thank the patrons that are hanging around and supporting the channel. So, to start with that, the $10 patrons are Atheon, Alex Farnham, Arbiter Daydream, Barkus, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Candelathra, Blob World, Dylan Dworsky, Athrain, James Harthorn, JC4 Science, Josh, Luzanth, Vicotel, Michta, Nerve, Ruby, Sanyu, Sharp247, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Wodad01, and Zeraphir. Also, thanks, of course, to all of the other patrons for supporting the channel. It is much appreciated. It's a little sneak peek on what we're getting into. There's going to be a lot more of these kind of big re-reviews of weapon types and their new builds and stuff, as things changed a lot at the end of last year. And of course, there's also planned new free-to-play before we get into any more big updates. So look forward to that.